Will, it's very, very difficult to know what it's going to take to knock Putin off his perch. What do you think it would take?
Well, I think it's going to have to take this economic crisis hitting Russia's main street. In other words, not only hitting the oligarchs, but hitting the people who work for the state, but also those people still engaged in private business. And once this recession, which everyone predicts is going to be very deep in Russia, begins to hit Russia's main street, Putin will most likely begin to feel some political pressures as a result of Russia's current difficult economic condition.
Well, it's already happening. Inflation, the most recent month of figures for inflation show inflation running at 11.4%. That hits people's pocketbooks immediately. What beyond? I mean, when you talk about hitting Main Street Russia, what's involved? How does the typical Russian need to feel things in order for Putin to lose his grip on the country?
I think they're going to begin to feel it when the price of food goes up dramatically, and that's already happening. They're going to feel it when they try to go to their local mall and see how high prices are and various shortages. And they're going to feel it if they attempt to go abroad. And Russians, since the collapse of the Soviet Union, have been traveling increasingly to other countries. So all those things are going to be felt, and they are coming. Putin does have some advantages, one of which is there is no real political opposition. That is one of the things that Vladimir Putin has been very successful in, making sure that there is no alternative to himself. So I think it will take time for a social and economic crisis to evolve into a more open political struggle, but there's every indication that this is possible, although how long it takes is anyone's guess.
Okay, so let's tie it back to here, though, Will, which is as the people start to, as you say, start to feel even more some of the malaise that's going on in the Russian economy, is that an opportunity for the United States here as there's new congressional leadership? The president has 2 years left here in his term, an opportunity to reset relations with Russia.
I don't think we're about to reset relations with Russia until there is some resolution of the crisis in Ukraine. There are hints that at least Secretary of State Kerry and Foreign Minister Lavrov are talking. There are outlines of a possible deal in eastern Ukraine. That deal has been on the table since the beginning of this crisis. So we just have to wait and see whether there's some sort of resolution in eastern Ukraine. I'm not even referring to Crimea because I think eastern Ukraine will have to take place before Crimea.
Right.
But once there's some sort of resolution or some sort of compromise on that issue, then we can begin to talk about how the United States and Russia begin to restart their relations.
Well, do you see that possibility at all in 2015, Will?
It depends on how much pain Vladimir Putin is willing to accept in order to pursue his annexation of Crimea and activities in Ukraine. It depends on how the Ukrainian situation develops, whether there's a collapse of the Ukrainian state, which is also facing dire economic consequences. Putin, as I said earlier, has had the option to have an off-ramp to end this crisis from the very beginning. And that would allow the most severe sanctions most likely to end. And it would demand that Putin observe the Minsk ceasefire and the borders of eastern Ukraine, and again, excluding Crimea. That is the deal that remains on the table, and I think what we have to wait and see during 2015 is will the economic situation in Russia deteriorate to the extent that Putin would have to back down and find some way to get out of the crisis in eastern Ukraine. He hasn't shown that yet, but that is what...
Will, how would you rate the situation Russia? How would you rate the situation Russia faces now with what it went through in 2009 and then what it previously went through in the debt default of '98?
I think the situation is much more difficult than it was in either of those two crises. In 2009, the oil price fell down quickly but recovered quickly. And there's no indication that that is going to happen in this crisis, especially because the U.S. now is a major producer of oil and energy. And I don't think it's the same crisis as 1998, because in 1998, people really didn't possess a lot of property. They weren't really kind of tied into the system. That's not the case in 2015. People are going to experience some real economic loss this time around, and that's why I think this crisis is different from either of those two previous crises.